Welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei, and I'm so excited to paint with you today. Thank you for being here. I am going to be tackling our first project in Floral February, where we're going to be concentrating a lot on different flowers and techniques. The first project that we're going to be doing this month is going to be a loose petal flower in this beautiful, delicate peachy color. So the supplies I'm going to be using in this video include our paints. I'm using Core paint. You can certainly use any brand that you have available to you. And the colors I'm using are cadmium red or a warm red, cadmium yellow, as well as sap green for our leaves and stems. You could also make your own green and or add a little bit of cobalt or ultramarine blue in with your green if you want to make variations of different shades of that green. All right, so lastly, I'm using a size 12 silver black velvet brush. You can use any round brush will do. You could certainly even go as small as a size 6 would probably be just fine. And then if you wanted to introduce for any of the details, having a rigger brush is always really handy, or a fine liner. This is a size 2 fine liner brush with these really long, delicate hairs at the end, which make it really easy to add fine details, which can come in very handy with lots of our florals. All right, so let's get started. Oh, and lastly, I didn't mention the paper we're using, or I'm using Arsh 140 pound cold press. It's a 100% cotton paper. You could certainly use hot press for some of your florals as well. Some folks really love to use hot press for details, but we're doing a lot of loose painting, so I still like to use the hot press with a little texture to it. You certainly don't have to use Arsh. You can also use any other 100% cotton paper you have, or if you don't have 100% cotton, give it a go with what you have on hand. I'm sure you'll do a lovely job. Just remembering that each paper makes things work a little bit differently, but that's part of the beauty of watercolor, especially when we're doing loose paintings, is letting go and letting the magic happen and seeing what you get after applying the techniques. All right, so let's get started and go to our overhead camera. Okay, so I just want to show you on here on paper, because what we're going to be doing is putting down water first in the shape of our flower that we want the paint to take on, and that you can't really see on camera exactly where I'm putting water. So I'm going to first be laying down water in the center, and I skip spots, so when I lay it down like this, I will take my brush and I will lay it down in the center and then a little bit on the side here to kind of make that full petal. But there will be spots where I skip, or there's little gaps in my water. And that is meant to create kind of these spaces up here, these rougher edges, to communicate that this is very organic and petal-like. Not every petal is perfect. And that, I think, gives it interest. And then I take my brush and I just add some smaller, kind of on an angle, petals on the side like this. So you can see this is here, and this is here. And then I would just take my brush and instead of making it as wide, just kind of a little smaller on the side like that. So let's do that on our paper now. Moving this out of the way. So I have my brush, nice clean water. I'm dabbing it off on the side a little bit. This brush holds a lot of water, so I don't want it all rushing out onto the page too much. So I'm putting in that center petal, and you can see I take a couple of strokes to do that and fill in that area. And then on the side, I definitely leave space or gaps. And again, I know you can't see this very well. And just make sure it all comes together at the bottom there. And now I'm going to pick up some of my color, my orangey, peachy red color, just adding a little bit more. The great thing about cotton papers is you have time. So this is pretty wet still and it's not going to dry like instantly. With wood pulp papers, you might have to work a little faster because they tend to dry faster. So I've just dropped in at the base of my flower paint. And I'm actually just pushing additional more and more paint here in the base, and it's pushing paint upward into the water. So you can see it's already starting to take on the shape. You can start to see this center petal here is taking on that shape. It's coming up the sides, and then also moving its way up this side petal over here. And as it continues to move and dry, it's going to take on more of that shape, and it's going to create these really soft, lovely transitions. Look at this one, how delicate that flower looks. Here I added more paint and it traveled further, and you get these nice, when you're working wet on wet and you add more water, you're going to get these nice crisp edges where the water actually pushes the paint all the way to the edge of that water barrier. So let's try to create some of those things here. So as this is drying, you can see it's taking on more of the shape. I've rinsed my brush off completely. And this is where you have to use some discretion, letting the paint and water do what they're going to do, but just helping them along a little bit. But remember, this is not all about you. It's about the paint and the paper. So I'm just going to nudge this up the side just a little bit. I have no paint and no real water on my brush. I'm just using what is already on the paper. And I'm just nudge, 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 nudge. If you want to create some of those kind of lettucey, soft lettucey edges, so I just added another little dollop right in there just to create some more contrast towards the bottom, make it darker towards the bottom. And that will continue to spread a little bit as well. But what I was saying is, if you want to create those kind of really crisp edges, if you just take clean water and add a drop of water in there, it will start to push paint out to the sides. This one might have been a little too dry already, but we'll try it again later on. And we'll see what happens as it dries. So you can see it's really starting to take shape now. It looks quite lovely. I don't love these little white gaps down here. I'm just gonna fill those in. That's where I missed parts with the water. Just pushing paint into them and letting it soften a little. All right, so step 2 for this will be picking up your green. You want this to dry quite a bit and just be slightly damp, so that just a little bit of this green goes into your flower. So if it's too wet still, if you can still see a puddle, if when you rock your paper back and forth there's still movement of water, it's too wet still, the green will travel too far. So this is just about where I want it. It is still a little wetter than I would normally do, but let's see what happens. So I'm just going to take my green and I'm just going to touch it to the edge, but really bring it down. But just the very edge of it, I'm letting it touch and kind of blend up into the flower a little bit. It gives this natural transition, and I can see where it's kind of going further than I want it to. That's okay. If that happens, just rinse off your brush, nice clean brush, damp, not a lot of water on it, and just push that green back to where you want it. There you go. All right, so we're gonna let that one dry, and now we're gonna work on a bunch more. So I love this project because it can be very meditative. You're just gonna make a ton of these flowers, and with my students in person, that's what we do. We're just gonna practice filling our whole page with different sizes. We'll make little buds. So over here, we'll just do a bud, which is like a oval egg, kind of teardrop shaped. I know those are 3 different shapes, but like an oval with points on it, egg shaped with points on either end. And again, I'm only adding paint to the bottom usually and letting it do its thing. And then if I want the paint to travel higher on the sides, just pushing it up a little bit. You can experiment and kind of drop in some paint like on one little part on the top edge, like I did there, and then let that kind of run down. But I wouldn't encourage you to outline it. You start to lose some of that softness that you're looking for. All right, so let's make another one. Center, side petal, side petal. And then if you look to the side of it, so I always tilt my paper and you can see a little flash of that, that dampness, that wetness there. Just to make sure I have enough water for the paint to travel. And then I'm gonna start to just drop, 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 drop. And I'm just pushing, pushing, pushing more paint in. And then you can, like I said, travel up the side a little bit. Put a little there. And then let it dry, or let it do its thing. And I like to do that and then move on to the next one, kind of as that's drying, and then kind of revisit, like let's circle back around and see how things are going. All right, so let's add another one. So this can be really great, just painting kind of the same thing over and over again with very slight variations in what you're adding. Drop, 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 drop. And moving on, clean water. So I have 2 water cups for this project. So I'm rinsing in one. Here's my dirty water. And then I'm picking up clean water from here. So I'm really getting nice clean water where I'm not introducing more paint when I do the wash first. This one is kind of chunky. You'll see when I add water to it. I didn't leave a lot of gaps between the petals, so we'll see how this looks when it's done, but it's quite wide. I'm gonna rinse my brush off, and then I'm just gonna push this up a little bit. This is the center one, the side one. So another thing you can do while your flowers are drying and you want to introduce a little bit more color, maybe it's not as dark or bright or vibrant as you want it to be, or you want to add just a little more contrast, you can take a little bit of what I like to do sometimes is so I've mixed cadmium red and cadmium yellow together to make this orange color. So I'm just going to take a little cadmium yellow, water it way down, and just introduce a bit of just cadmium yellow to it, so I get this yellow color. Look at that, how lovely that is on top of that. So a little burst of additional color. And you could do the same thing with red. Red is a little stronger, you got to be a little more careful. Let me put this up here. Sorry, you can't see that on camera. So this is red. Let's see what happens. I'm going to introduce it to this one down here to create, try to create a little separation. So you can see my center petal here. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of melding in with my side petals. So I added the cadmium red here onto this petal and here to try to get them to separate a little bit. And I think that's working. We'll see. This is all about experimentation. So let's add a little green to my rosebud here. This is much drier, which is good. It's just going to travel a little. These are still too wet, so let's keep going. I'm going to add, and you can definitely plan this out if you want to put little marks on your page maybe beforehand, so you know kind of, or just visualize where you're going to put your flowers. I'm just going with the flow. Clean, damp brush, just moving already existing paint around on the page. And let's see, I'm going to pick up some green. I think this one is ready. So just barely touching the edge. I don't want it to be too far up into it, but I want them to come together. I don't want there to be a gap between. So it's just traveling up a little. So, yeah, that one's going to travel far, but that's all right. I'm going to let it go, and I know I can always push it back if I need to. So this one, as it continues to travel too far for me, just taking my clean brush with not really any water on it and just pushing the green back and lifting some of it off. There we go. This one's okay. This one I kind of like the pattern it made, but you can push it back a little bit. So the key to that green is really letting them be almost dry. If they're perfectly dry, you won't get any blending at all. So it's a little bit of an art to get it just the right amount of dampness. So now we have a whole bunch of flowers on here in various stages of drying. This one is probably the most dry. And you can see, I don't know if you remember, in the beginning, we added a drop of water to this leaf because or this petal, because we wanted to force a background really. And basically that has pushed all of the paint to this edge and created this nice crisp edge here. How fun is that, right? So I'm going to do that on another one that's still wet. So this one has a lot of paint in this leaf and it's still pretty wet. So I'm just going to take a drop of water and add it to that and see what that does as it dries. It's just going to take time. I have to let it dry. So this is the patience part while you let those dry. If you're working on, you know, you're not trying to do a final piece, you could just fill this whole page with these, put every little nook and cranny, and that would be really fun actually, and very meditative. You can sit, put music on, or just the quietness of your, you know, wherever your art space is, and just really enjoy painting and learning what the paint will do, learning some water control. How much water you put on affects the different shapes that you'll get, but some of it is going to be a surprise, and that's okay. All right, so I've just started to bring in stems with the very tip of my brush. I'm going to connect a few of them to each other. Actually, that would be weird there, so I'm just going to go right through that one. This one I'm going to connect my rosebud to that one. That looks fine. Just be careful if you hit the top of a petal with the stem. I do this all the time, and it's still damp. It is going to pull that green right into that petal. So just be careful along those edges. Only go as far as you need to. So now I have these nice stems, and I'm going to add in some leaves as filler. Leaves are, I like to do these really simple, just kind of one stroke simple leaves where I'm going to bring out a stem, and then I'm just going to push down with my brush and lift up at the end just to create this one stroke kind of stem. So it gets wide in the center and a tip at the end. And the less you push down, so if you only push down a little and drag, you'll just get a smaller leaf like that. So you can create a bunch of those kind of wherever you feel you need to fill in space. Well, now that's too many, so I feel like this is patterned now, but I'll try to fix that in a moment. Feel free to turn your page. You'll notice I did not tape this page down. It's not very water heavy overall. Like, yes, you're using a lot of water in very specific spots, but it's not water heavy overall where it's going to make the whole page buckle on you. You don't really need to adhere it. And it's really nice to be able to turn your page, especially when you're working on this. A lot of these spots are still wet and I don't want to run my hand across it. And of course, I could be super patient and just let it all dry first before I continue to work, but I want to keep working now. In your green, I said before, you can use whatever green you like. I'm going to take my sap green. I'm just going to add a little phthalo blue, and it's going to cool this green down and darken it a little bit. And I'm going to add a few more leaves. So I'm going to actually take a leaf from this stem. So these are all coming from here, and I don't like that. I'm going to experiment here. I don't know how this is going to work. I'm going to take a leaf over top of this and just put it right over those leaves in this darker color. to kind of break things up. And then I'll put one over here. It's okay to overlap things. They don't have to be perfectly like positioned around each other. You can even take a leaf like up here, and I'm just going to stop. Now it's tucked behind that a little bit. You just have to be a little careful as you go around things. So that goes right around that petal there. You see that? So it gives the illusion that some of this leaf is behind that petal. There we go. All right, I think we're done. I think we're done. So let's take a look at our flowers as they're drying. This one is still drying here. I love some of the edges and the various colors we got. Let me just show you, if you're not happy, like this one, there's not a lot of separation between the leaves. It's still very delicate and very soft. You can go back in. My brush wasn't very clean. You can see a little green there. But you can go back in, add clean water, as long as it was already dry. So this one was completely dry. I'm adding clean water. And I'm just going to take a little bit of my my peachy color mixture, and I'm just going to add a little bit more color. And I put it specifically on this edge, knowing that I really want some separation there. I want to create a little bit more definition, not a lot. I don't want it to be a hard line. And then I just added more to this petal over here. So that petal kind of gets pushed back with more separation. So you can go and add layers onto these. You don't always have to. Sometimes they're really beautiful with just that one layer, but you can go back in and add layers. And as that dries, it will continue to lighten and soften and blend. You just want to re-wet your flower before you do it. All right, well, this was super fun. I really enjoy making these types of flowers. They're really easy, really meditative. They give you a big bang for your buck because they're just gorgeous and lovely. I want to thank you for joining me once again. I'm Shayna Searcy. Go ahead and check out the description of this video if you want to know how to find some of the supplies that I use every day, and also some recommendations for beginners. For those of you who have subscribed and followed and left comments, you are fabulous, and I love to read every single one of them. So please feel free to leave a comment. And those who have put money in that tip jar, my heart is just full from that support. So thank you so much. All right, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you back here shortly for a new tutorial.